group of women. They're not what you expect. They're very radical women in one way and conservative in another, and you have that contrast with them.
They're not just very highly trained doctors and nurses and sociologists and pharmacists, but they are also spiritual women who have a prayer life.
The medical missionaries provided extremely important provision of service, particularly in their missions abroad, spreading the message of Catholicism as they saw it to really troubled and disadvantaged regions throughout the 20th century.
He was trying to get a drip up on a little baby. And I said to him, "Isn't it funny?" I said, "It's all the healthy babies that have the cholera." And I can still see his face when he looked at me and he said, "The others just didn't make it to the hospital." Yeah.
I was there for all the AIDS crisis. That was a dreadful time. If I ever found it depressing, that was the time. Because I used to go out to visit people in their homes, and hundreds of young people, some of our own staff, died during the AIDS epidemic.
In that hospital, they were not sisters, they were, ordinary people. And when the war came, they decided to go home. So the hospital had no doctors. So they told me to leave the one where I was and go to that hospital.
Mother Mary always said, "Go where there is no help, where the people really need us." So in Musaka, we handed over in 2000, and I went down the town, there was a town very near, and started with Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I got from that into the street children.
I started caring for sick people with HIV/AIDS in their homes. And when I went to those homes, I discovered that many of them, maybe one parent had died, another parent was ill, and they were being cared for by children.
What the Irish Sisters, the MMMs in particular, did around promoting primary health care in the 1970s and 80s, this was the big thing that came out of the World Health Organization conference. The work that Irish Sisters do in Africa was seen as state of the art. State of the art. And I think we never quite appreciated from back here what was going on out there in terms of the quality of this.
They said, if you're going to Uganda, fistula is a problem there. That's birth injuries.
The fistula patients, they were driven from their homes, from their husbands. They drove them, the children drove them, they were driven from their compound, and they were known as, outcasts to the highest order. And they came into us broken women, and they went out like ladies.
After the baby is born, the next thing, the teachers there's gangrene, and it ulcers, and it ulcerates and falls out, and it's a big hole in between the bladder and the vagina, so nothing stays in the bladder, so she's wet all the time, pouring down her legs.
A young fella came in and his foot hanging off, it was terrible. He had been one of these circular saws. He'd been working, in a place where they were cutting trees and things, and it got his foot. So I was at the head watching. He was breathing all right, and suddenly he started grimacing, and I said, "Can you feel that?" He said, "No, I can hear it." He could hear the saw going to cut it off. So I found that very hard. But then when you saw him later, and we managed to get him to Moshi to get a prosthesis, and he came back and he helped other people who had amputations, you know. So that was good, I must say. A lot of that was good.
I knew that Dr. Matthew very well because we used to go to meetings together. Yeah, and he was the first, he spotted it. This patient came in to his hospital because he was telling us about it later, but before he died himself, how he thought there was something strange about this patient. And there was Ebola in the Congo or somewhere, and he rang up the Department of Health and he said to them, I think I might have a case of Ebola. And they said, if you think you have a case of Ebola, you have. So you do this, that and the other, and we're coming. And within no time they were there. So they were able to contain it in that hospital, but they lost a lot of staff as well as.
And I used to go to a place in London and get artificial eyes, because I had to put in eyes in people that I had to remove an eye after a mine explosion or something. I went out to Drogheda to the rehabilitation. A doctor there gave me artificial legs. It's because I had to amputate so many legs.
When missionaries started to go to Africa in the late 1800s, the average life expectancy having arrived was 3 years. So you went out there as a 28-year-old and you were lucky if you saw 35.
An awful lot of missionaries died with blackwater fever and malaria in those days, you know, especially in the early days, yeah.
This is a phase at which the white Catholic missionaries of Europe are going out into what they would see as less civilised parts of the world to alleviate the suffering of peoples as they saw it in that very almost neo-Victorian mindset.
We should indeed be proud of Ireland's missionary achievements, and especially proud of the newest of our missionary congregations. Year by year, we are able to send out zealous apostles to extend the empire of Christ in pagan lands.
In some senses about the salvation of souls, elsewhere about spreading the message of the gospel and also spreading provision of care more generally. The Irish Catholic Church, like religious communities across the world, would see it as the crowning glory of their order if they had established a mission elsewhere.
You know, we're talking about 1930s, I think, when there was still a struggle for women to become professionals. I mean, you had to leave the civil service and the bank when you got married and all of that sort of thing. So that was a major breakthrough for, you would say, women's rights. Was also very prophetic in terms of the need to have that focus and the way that the whole question of women in development and the role of women in society and so on has emerged as one of the key issues in development today.
Returned missionaries usually visited schools. It was a process of encouraging vocations, and they had the movie Visitation.
At Afikpo, a new general hospital is being built and staffed by the Medical Missionaries, who thus begin another great undertaking. It is being constructed of concrete blocks and will conform to the specifications laid down for hospitals being built in Nigeria today. There is something in this pioneer work reminding the onlooker of the building of the pyramids, great concrete blocks being carried by hand, the absence of modern building machinery to facilitate the work, the team spirit, the achievement due entirely to hard physical labour.
We're in a phase now where we're embracing more of a historical pluralism about Ireland's past. In the same way that we're able to simultaneously embrace the history of the First World War and the history of the 1916 Rising, we're also looking at complicating narratives in Ireland's past. So everything from clerical abuse to industrial laundries to the good work that was done domestically and abroad by the Catholic Church.
I always remember a priest called Franz Deckers in Kabanga. He used to say the White Fathers were the first missionaries in East Africa. Remember, they had a white kanzu and a big rosary beads. And they used to say that they were there in that Kabanga parish and nobody was ever converted until the hospital came. Yeah. Until the hospital was opened and people saw that these white people are also bringing healing.
There were quite a number of African nurses came out for training when we were here. They did their training with us, you know, and went back to their own country then and worked. So we always had a view of teaching people so as they could be more independent, you know.
The hospital was built by the Medical Missionaries of Mary and carries out an extensive training system for young sisters entering the medical profession in any or all of its branches. It is fully equipped with every modern improvement and the finest X-ray apparatus.
I've always had the impression that, especially in recent years, that the Medical Missionaries of Mary are a group of women who certain sections of society have possibly tried to airbrush out of history.
Over the last 20 to 30 years, we really see a pendulum swing from outright obedience and reverence towards revulsion. And I think now we're looking at almost a revisionist phase where we're beginning to synthesize these two diametrically opposed views. And we need to look at the complexity of this.
It's important to tell these stories now, before it's too late, of really how impressive and how revolutionary so much of it was.
It is really rather hard work because there'd be so many patients coming, you know what I mean? And it may be, you'd be all morning sort of seeing the new patients in harder time, just go and see the old patients like that. It is certainly pretty busy, but it was all right. We kept going, it was all right.
We learned a lot from the people. They were all very poor people. And to see them struggling, from that point of view, I found it very inspirational to see what mothers could cope with and cope with loss of children and all that. So I think I learned a lot from the patients. I felt sometimes I learned far more than I could give them, in their endurance under such poor conditions.
People know you're there because you love them, and you love them because they're God's children.
There would be a lot of people, I'd say, who wouldn't really be happy looking back at their life. They would say, I could have done more, I should have done more. I don't think like that. I think myself, I did the best I could. And I have to leave the rest, really.